All right, everyone, we start off today, of course, with the Day 4 Ukraine invasion update. Now, apparently last night there were a bunch of tanks, Russian tanks, moving in and around the Kiev area. The siege there continues. I would really love it if there were one non-propagandistic source that I could use that wasn't, derived, like an independent source, an actual primary source, some sort of group that's trying to monitor the losses on either side to give us at least something, a semblance of an estimate of who's winning, if you can say anyone is. Of course, people are dying and suffering right now, and there are all too many people glorifying it. They're getting on the W train. I see people doing all sorts of warmongering, and most of these people would never actually serve, so they can shut the hell up. Here's a general update. But first, I should point out, down below, of course, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment with links to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make exclusive material every single day. Not always just on Ukraine, by the way, to the newcomers who might not realize that, that go on those platforms. It doesn't go on YouTube because YouTube is algorithmically all hell, basically, at this point. The first thing I wanted to talk about was, again, something to vaguely lighten the mood. The other day there was briefly a 5,000 helmets meme, or 10,000 helmets, because you know how the Polish sent an entire convoy full of ammunition and missiles and shit? I think even the Dutch have sent a bunch of Stinger missiles, by the way, into Ukraine now. So they're getting huge heaps of advanced military aid. They've got so many anti-tank missiles at this point that Russia probably is at least somewhat nervous. Those systems are pretty good, and they will destroy an Armada tank, by the way, if fired properly. But for a while, it looked like Germany was only going to give them a bunch of combat helmets. 5,000 helmets therefore became a meme. Now, they did reiterate thereafter, of course, they do have other material they're sending them. They're sending them a shit ton of fuel. They're sending them other missiles. The laundry list of things that have been sent into Ukraine to try to combat the Russian advance is significant because if you add it to the material the Ukrainian military already possessed, and we'll also get to other groups that have now joined the fight, they probably have firepower and now manpower approaching the capabilities of Russia. If Russia does lose, again, losing and winning in this situation is entirely relative and speculative. At some point, you're just like, everyone's suffering, everyone's fucked up. If Russia does not maintain its presence, if the Ukrainians effectively force them back, either just to the eastern provinces where they do have more friendly support locally, the Russians do, or out of Ukraine altogether, it will be effectively the end of Putin's career, but he will have still accomplished something. He took advantage of a moment where NATO couldn't do jack shit, and individual nations outside of those defense treaties and frameworks, outside of the normal diplomatic channels, the UN human rights groups just punted back hearings over Russia targeting civilian infrastructure and shit to a week from now. They're not taking it seriously. The globaloid groups aren't. Individual countries, especially led by Poland, Romania, Hungary, some of the behind the Iron Curtain nations, you'll notice, they're the ones that took initiative initially, and now the rest of Europe, Western Europe, reluctantly giving some aid, but it's mainly the Eastern countries. And they've been spending years, obviously. Strategically, they understood that NATO wasn't enough. Poland has one of the top tank groups in the entire world now. How many fucking tanks does Poland have? It's an enormous number. Some of their other neighbors have invested in some good shit too. Even the Western Europeans, in some cases, like the French, are rearming. That plus the strengthening of NATO under Trump was really good, but then we got a vegetable in office in the U.S., and that's really one of the problems. One of the things leading to the diplomatic side of this is the U.S. energy policy. Under Trump, it was totally laissez-faire. Go ahead and drill. If you find a drop of oil, drill deeper. Under Biden, he immediately hyper-re-regulated the energy industry. He immediately slowed down or attempted to stop. In the latter, he was partially unsuccessful due to court decisions. Drilling permits, including those already granted for federal lands. He immediately nixed Keystone, which would have at least indirectly cooled off oil prices to some marginal degree. We now see the result of this piss-poor U.S. energy policy. The U.S., to be clear, is #1 in the world now for oil and gas. It's also, I think it's number 2 for coal. The U.S. is the energy magnet of the entire fucking world. People like Joe Biden don't like this fact. Maybe they don't get enough money from the fuel companies. Maybe they just want, they want China to make more money, so they want to peddle more solar panels and more coal-powered cars, aka electric cars, using, again, Chinese components and lithium in their batteries, sometimes even from North Korea. It's a power grab, it's a cash grab, it's NIMBYism, it's not really about saving the planet, saving the environment, it's all horseshit. U.S. energy policy should be inverted. We should deregulate. We should not be investing in any Chinese-backed projects whatsoever. Solar fields are being built one after the other out west in the United States by the Chinese at Chinese benefit, using U.S. taxpayer money to clear things out beforehand bureaucratically. Then those are not going to be regulated as much. Chinese components from a Chinese firm built by, in some cases, Chinese laborers in order to undercut cost are now being used to supply energy to American people. That's the insanity of globalism, especially with regards to energy policy. What we should do is immediately restore Keystone. Biden never should have removed the Nord Stream sanctions. He was stupid to do that because now the Germans have taken the fore, much like they did in other actions. The sanctioning, effectively, the Nord Stream cancellation, at least intermediate term, that's all Germany. It could have been the United States, but Biden doesn't want to put the screws to the Eastern Bloc because these people have dirt on him. That's really what it boils down to. Then we got to talk about Zelensky. Now, already you have the Ukrainian military, presumably various mercs, citizen volunteers in Ukraine fighting Russia. Now Zelensky's saying, hey, if any foreigner comes and wants to fight for us, we'll give you a weapon and all the goods, and yeah, you're allowed to come in and go fight, and you have my respect. That could unleash quite a wave of people in that general region of the world who have combat experience. Hey, I'm down and out because, the European economy right now has problems. I'm Polish, I'm Romanian or something. Zelensky is going to give me free shit, possibly even pay me. I'll get a bounty if I go and kill some Russians and cut off their ears. Why not? It's what I'm good at. I've already served. I've got combat experience, or at least training. Now, I'm a sergeant in the Polish military. I don't have anything else to do. The Polish military directly can't go in, but I can go in. Oh, yeah, it's a great idea. By the way, maybe foreign militaries will end up joining the fray. You do realize that outside of the framework of NATO, a country like Hungary could say, you know what, we're joining the fight on behalf of Ukraine, or technically on the behalf of Russia. It's outside NATO. We're not triggering any articles. We don't care. We'll take care of it ourselves. We want to get some blood on our hands and water the tree of liberty, or whatever you'd call it in Ukraine. The tree of slightly liberalized autocracy, a la, post-Russian style. The fact is that let's not pretend that the Ukrainian government wasn't deeply corrupt. There was a reason why they got withheld certain U.S. aid under Trump too, based on the fact that they did not meet markers that existed to try to tackle their corruption problem. That doesn't mean they should be invaded and that the Russians should be roving around there and possibly losing in the process. But at the same time, let's not pretend that corruption didn't exist. So yeah, there's a little bit of a news update. I don't have any totals to give you with regards to casualties, the number of air systems destroyed, tanks destroyed. Here's the problem again, and I've mentioned it twice before. You have a fog of war reporting style right now where everything under the kitchen sink is being flung out into the public. At this point, people are just taking up bits and pieces of narrative from people they happen to trust for one reason or another. It's usually not the legacy media, by the way. Maybe for people over 60, they still watch CNN or Fox or something. Really, it's generation fucking YouTube, TikTok, and arguably new tech at this point that's driving the public conversation. By the way, that's probably why the situation is less dire than it could otherwise be. And keep in mind, this is with everyone with their smartphones and shit flinging out info. You got pictures of dead soldiers and stuff, and yet there's a sense that the direness that would have existed maybe post-Crimea invasion actually, I think, is lesser despite the invasion being more prominent. In all respects, when I look at the news, absent the legacy media, the takes and analysis that I'm seeing are less dire. There appears to be more optimism that some sort of progress can be made, regardless of what you call progress, I suppose, in this particular theater. So yes, we've had a brief meme about Germany, but it was just a meme. Very quickly, they followed it up with other aid. It's not actually just they're sending a bunch of combat helmets to the Ukrainians. U.S. energy policy right now is definitely under a magnifying glass. It's being politicized, but really, there were conversations to be had before this happened. U.S. energy policy had already deeply deviated from common sense, just looking at the inflation. And that's one final thing I would like to point out, which is that at the State of the Union, which I will be live streaming during, assuming that I can stay awake long enough. I got an extra energy drink, so I should be good to go. And thereafter, Biden is going to pretend that cumulative inflationary damage, shortages, etc., and the European governments might do this too, that is the result of their own lockdowner-based policies and hyper-regulation is the result of Russian sanctions. They will then quietly try to shush that material up entirely and have the legacy media not even talk about it because people won't have the stomach for a foreign conflict while they're suffering that much domestically. This happened under Jimmy Carter, by the way. There was a reason why the policies there were a little bit fucked up. That's about all. Peace out.